Have you ever stopped to think about how many times a day you try to control situations that are completely beyond your reach? How many hours do you waste worrying about what might go wrong tomorrow, next week, or next year? If you're like most people, probably more time than you'd like to admit. And here's the cruel paradox. The more you try to control, the more anxious you become. The more you plan every detail, the more the world seems to conspire against you. The more you prepare for all possibilities, the more possibilities arise to torment you. We are living in a time where anxiety has reached epidemic levels. It's no coincidence. Our modern society has sold us the idea that we must have control over everything. Our career, our relationships, our health, our future, even our thoughts and emotions. And when we inevitably fail to control the uncontrollable, we blame ourselves. We think we are weak, inadequate, that we're not trying hard enough. But the truth is much more liberating than that. The truth is that you were programmed to seek control. It's not a character flaw, it's a fundamental feature of the human brain. Our ancestors who managed to anticipate and control dangers survived and passed on their genes. Those who didn't became prey. So yes, you have a brain that is constantly scanning the environment for threats, trying to predict the future, planning contingencies. That's how our species got this far. But here's the problem. This same mechanism that kept us alive in the African savanna is slowly killing us in the modern era. Your brain can't distinguish between a hungry lion and an email from your boss. It can't differentiate between a real storm and the possibility that you might be fired in 6 months. To your nervous system, everything is a threat that needs to be controlled, anticipated, managed. And this is how the illusion of control was born. You believe that if you think enough, plan enough, worry enough, you will be able to control the outcome. You believe your anxiety is productive, your worry is useful, your obsessive planning is necessary. But science shows us something completely different. Researchers have found that people who believe they have more control over their lives are generally happier and less anxious. That seems to contradict what I'm saying, right? But wait. The trick is to understand the difference between real control and illusory control. Real control is focusing on what you can genuinely influence, your actions, your choices, your responses. Illusory control is trying to influence what is beyond your reach, other people's actions, future events, external circumstances. Let's do a mental exercise. Think about the last time you were really anxious. Now tell me, how many of the things that made you anxious did you actually have real control over? Not imaginary control. Not indirect influence, but direct and immediate control. If you're honest, you'll probably find that the vast majority of your worries revolve around things you simply cannot control. You can't control whether it will rain on your wedding day. You can't control whether your child will choose the profession you consider ideal. You can't control whether the economy will go into crisis. You can't control whether the person you love will love you back. You can't control whether you'll get sick. You can't control when you'll die. And yet, how many hours do you spend trying to control exactly these things? Neuroscience shows us that when we try to control the uncontrollable, we activate our brain's stress system. Cortisol floods our system, adrenaline spikes, our heart races. Our body prepares to fight or flee from a threat that doesn't physically exist. And since there's nothing to fight or flee from, that energy turns against ourselves. Result: anxiety, insomnia, muscle tension, digestive problems, chronic fatigue. But there is a way out, and it doesn't involve gaining more control. It involves something our culture considers almost heresy: accepting the lack of control, accepting uncertainty, accepting that you are not the director of the movie of your life, you are just one of the actors. And this acceptance, paradoxically, gives you more power than any illusion of control ever could. When you accept that you can't control the outcome, you can focus all your energy on the process. When you accept that you can't control what others do, you can focus on what you do. When you accept that you can't control the future, you can focus on the present. And this is where true freedom begins. Think of elite athletes. They don't obsess over winning the gold medal. They obsess over training, technique, preparation. They can't control what other athletes will do, but they can control what they themselves do. They can't control if they have a bad day, but they can control how they respond to a bad day. This is the paradox of control. When you stop trying to control the outcome, you gain more control over the process. But let me be clear, accepting the lack of control doesn't mean becoming passive. It doesn't mean giving up or not caring. It means directing your energy where it can really make a difference. It means stopping wasting mental power trying to move mountains and starting to focus on moving yourself. There's an old story about a man looking for his lost keys under a streetlight. A friend approaches and asks, "Did you lose your keys here?" The man replies, "No, I lost them inside the house, but the light is better here." This is a perfect metaphor for how we deal with control. We try to control where it's easier to see, not where we can really make a difference. Here's a truth that can change your life. You have control over much more than you imagine, and control over much less than you believe. You have full control over your actions right now. You have full control over how you interpret what happens to you. You have full control over where you place your attention. You have full control over how you treat yourself and others. But you don't have control over the results of those actions. You don't have control over how others will react. You don't have control over the circumstances that will arise. And you know what's amazing? When you truly accept this, when you really internalize this distinction, something magical happens. You stop fighting against the current and start sailing with it. You stop wasting energy trying to control the wind and start adjusting your sails. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the captain of your own ship. Let me tell you something. Psychologists discovered studying people who went through extreme trauma. Those who recovered best weren't necessarily those who had the most control over what happened to them. They were those who accepted more quickly that they had no control over what happened, but had control over how to respond. They didn't waste energy trying to change the past. They invested all their energy in building the future. This isn't just cheap philosophy, it's applied neuroscience. When you accept uncertainty, when you stop fighting what you can't control, you literally change your brain chemistry. Cortisol levels decrease. Activity in the prefrontal cortex increases. You become more creative, more focused, more resilient. You're no longer wasting mental resources trying to predict every possibility. You can use those resources to respond more effectively to what's really happening. But how do you do this in practice? How do you let go of control when every fiber of your being is screaming for you to hold on tighter? The answer lies in understanding that letting go of control is not an act of weakness. It's an act of courage. It takes courage to accept that you don't know what will happen tomorrow. It takes courage to make decisions without guarantees. It takes courage to trust the process when you can't see the outcome. And here's where many people get confused. They think accepting uncertainty means becoming paranoid, always expecting the worst. But it's exactly the opposite. When you truly accept uncertainty, you realize that both good and bad things can happen. You're no longer trapped in the trap of only imagining catastrophic scenarios. You're free to imagine positive possibilities too. Think about it. Why do you assume that losing control will necessarily lead to bad outcomes? Why do you assume that if you don't plan every detail, everything will go wrong? That's just a belief, not a fact. And it's a belief that's sabotaging your peace of mind. The truth is that many of the best things that have happened in your life probably weren't planned. Many of your greatest opportunities came when you least expected them. Many of your happiest moments happened when you weren't trying to control anything. Let's talk about something rarely discussed: the hidden cost of the need for control. It's not just anxiety, although that's obvious. It's the creativity you lose when you're obsessed with certainty. It's the spontaneity you sacrifice when everything needs to be planned. It's the relationships you damage when you try to control other people. It's the opportunities you miss because they don't fit into your rigid plan. When you're obsessed with control, you live in a box. It's a box made of your own expectations, your own fears, your own plans. And although that box may seem safe, it's actually a prison you built with your own hands. Lock by lock, worry by worry. Now imagine what would happen if you started questioning those laws. What would happen if you started challenging the need to be certain about everything? What would happen if you started seeing uncertainty not as a threat, but as an opportunity? What would happen if you started trusting your ability to handle whatever comes your way? That's the difference between an anxious mind and a peaceful mind. An anxious mind says, "I need to know what will happen to feel safe." A peaceful mind says, "I don't know what will happen, but I know I can handle it." An anxious mind says, "I need to control everything to avoid suffering." A peaceful mind says, "I can't control everything, but I can choose how to respond."
And here's where things get really interesting. When you stop trying to control everything, when you accept uncertainty,
When you trust your ability to handle whatever comes, something extraordinary happens. You develop what psychologists call resilience. You become like a tree that bends with the wind instead of breaking. You become like water that flows around obstacles instead of crashing against them. Resilience is not about not feeling fear. Resilience is feeling fear and acting anyway. Resilience is not about not feeling pain. Resilience is feeling pain and continuing to grow. Resilience is not about having control over what happens. Resilience is maintaining control over how you respond to what happens. Now, I want you to think of someone you admire, someone you consider strong, successful, balanced. I bet that person didn't get where they are by trying to control every variable in their life. I bet they got where they are by learning to navigate uncertainty, make decisions without guarantees, trust the process even when they couldn't see the outcome. These people aren't different from you. They simply understood something you're still learning, that life isn't about controlling what happens. It's about responding wisely to what happens. They aren't less anxious because they have more control. They are less anxious because they stopped fighting against the lack of control. And here's a truth that might sound controversial. Anxiety in many cases is a luxury. It's a luxury we can only afford when we believe we should have control over things we can't control. It's a luxury we can only afford when we believe worrying will magically change the outcome. It's a luxury we can only afford when we don't accept the fundamental reality of human existence. That uncertainty is the only certainty. When you truly accept this, when you really internalize this truth, you realize that anxiety is optional. It's not an automatic response to uncertainty. It's a choice you make every time you decide you should have control over something you can't control. That doesn't mean you'll never feel anxiety again. It means you'll recognize anxiety for what it really is, a sign that you're trying to control the uncontrollable. And when you recognize that, you can make a different choice. You can let go of control and focus on what really matters. Let me share with you a technique that has changed the lives of thousands of people. It's simple but powerful. Every time you feel anxiety rising, ask yourself this question: exactly what am I trying to control right now? Be specific, be honest, write it down if necessary. Then for each item on your list, ask a second question: is this really under my control? If the answer is yes, then you have work to do. If the answer is no, then you have something to let go of. It's that simple, and it's that hard, because letting go of control goes against every instinct you have. It goes against everything society has taught you. It goes against the narrative that you should be able to control your own life. But here's the secret. You don't have to let go of everything at once. You can start small. You can start by letting go of control over traffic when you're driving. You can start by letting go of control over your partner's mood. You can start by letting go of control over what people think of you. Every small act of letting go of control is a step toward freedom. And as you practice letting go of control over what you can't control, you can start exercising more control over what you really can control. You can control how you respond to traffic. You can control how you treat your partner. You can control how you see and value yourself. That is the true source of your power. Here's something I want you to deeply understand. You are not responsible for what happens to you, but you are responsible for what you do with what happens to you. You are not responsible for the thoughts that arise in your mind, but you are responsible for which thoughts you choose to nurture. You are not responsible for the emotions you feel, but you are responsible for how you act based on those emotions. This distinction is revolutionary. It frees you from the tyranny of trying to control the uncontrollable and empowers you to take full responsibility for what you really can control. It takes you out of the role of victim of circumstances and puts you in the role of architect of your own response. Now, before we continue, I want you to do something. I want you to write in the comments the words "awakened mind" if you are truly absorbing this, if you are feeling a shift in how you see control and anxiety. Because what I'm sharing with you is not just information, it's transformation. And transformation only happens when you actively participate in the process. Think about it. How many times have you intellectually known something, but couldn't apply it emotionally? How many times have you understood a concept with your rational mind, but couldn't feel its truth in your heart? That's the difference between knowledge and wisdom, between information and transformation. What I'm trying to show you is that anxiety is not a problem to be solved. It's a signal to be understood. It's your brain trying to protect you from a threat that doesn't exist. It's your mind trying to control a future that can't be controlled. It's your soul crying out for freedom from a prison you built yourself. And the key to that freedom isn't gaining more control, it's letting go of the control you never had. It's accepting the uncertainty that was always there. It's trusting your ability to handle whatever comes your way. When you truly understand this, when you really feel it, something fundamentally changes inside you. You stop living in the future and start living in the present. You stop fighting reality and start dancing with it. You stop trying to be the director of your life and start being its protagonist. And here's the final irony. When you stop trying to control everything, you gain more control over your own experience. When you accept uncertainty, you become more self-assured. When you let go of the need for guarantees, you find the true security that comes from within. This is not an easy journey. It's not a transformation that happens overnight. It's a process, a path, a daily practice of letting go of what can't be controlled and embracing what can be influenced. It's an invitation to live with more courage, more authenticity, more presence. And the most beautiful thing about all this is that you don't have to wait until you're perfect at this skill to start reaping the benefit. Every moment of acceptance, every act of letting go of control, every choice to focus on what really matters is a step toward the peace of mind you're seeking. So next time you feel anxiety rising, next time you catch yourself trying to control the uncontrollable, next time you feel overwhelmed by life's uncertainties, remember this conversation. Remember that you have a choice. You can keep fighting against the current, or you can learn to sail with it. You can keep clinging to illusory control, or you can embrace the freedom that comes from letting go of what was never yours to control. The choice is yours. It always was, and it always will be. And that may be the only certainty you really need.